Yeah.
We are live.
No,
Okay.
That's right. So. Yeah.
Shut the door.
And during that time, we did.
Yeah.
Discovered. We got Martin West.
Okay.
It's the most.
Martin.
Oh, It's.
My nickname, not my nickname.
You know.
Yeah, I'm from,
I don't know.
this is Senate Finance.
Yeah. Finance staff is like, it's a little bit.
Yeah. I grew up in-
This is
Yeah.
January 29th. It's hard to believe it's a month-ish. This is one of our favorite days. I don't know if you'll make us feel as wonderful as the captive insurance people do. But,
Only if you're bringing money.
yeah, they make money, but they love us because they make money too or save it. But this is Communication Union Districts, probably known as CUD. And, this is your day here, right? And we have you in every year. This committee did a lot of work creating CUDs in trying to find a way to bring broadband out into the rural areas of Vermont. The commercial carriers will only do, it's only cost effective for them. I believe if they have 10 houses per mile, and that leaves out an awful lot of Vermont. So Communications Union Districts, which are set up this municipality, were our solution, and look forward. It's been very positive up until now, so I hope we're still moving forward fast. So welcome, and just introduce yourself to the record. We are here.
All right, thank you for having us. So for the record, my name is Ellie DeVilliers. I'm the Executive Director of Maple Broadband, which is 20 towns in Addison County, and I'm the Chair of the Vermont CUD Association, CUDA.
My name is Krista Shute. I'm the Executive Director of NEK-CV, which is a combination of NEK Broadband and CV Fiber, 72 towns in Northeast and Central Vermont. And I'm also Secretary of the CUDA.
Okay, so we have a couple of introductory slides that I will mostly skip over because we had such a wonderful introduction from your chair. And as you mentioned, this committee was instrumental in a lot of the legislation that got us to this point, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So yeah, CUDs are municipalities, and we are committed to universal service, both as a requirement of the Act 71 funding received and also by mission. And the wonderful thing about being not-for-profit public entities with good transparency is that we can invest every single dollar we have into getting to the last mile and then continue to invest back into the communities around things like affordability. And all CUDs, just as a reminder, we're all in public-private partnerships of various different forms. There's a couple of different models and strategies, but it's really a great example of the public and private sector coming together to solve a problem. So as VCUDA, this is the Association of Communications Union Districts. So we speak to you here today as VCUDA, so as the Association of CUDs. And one of the things that we do, obviously, is come together to act with a shared voice, but we also spend a huge amount of time working together in committees to be able to drive efficiencies and learn from each other to make sure that because we're all solving the same problem, but every part of Vermont there are local differences and local challenges, but there's a lot that's common. So making sure that we're taking the time to speak to each other and learn from each other, that makes us be as efficient as we possibly can in terms of how we do it. And yeah, how we spend the money and how we acquire customers and how we serve the public, which is really why we're doing this. So the goal, just to remind you, is world-class broadband. And again, Act 71 of 2021 was really this is almost like our foundational North Star this is what created the Vermont Community Broadband Board, the Vermont Community Broadband Fund. And the intent of this, as we tell the story, which we tell both within the state and outside the state, is to be able to give the baby CUDs, the new CUDs that grew up on the model of EC Fiber, but to give us the advantages that they never had of giving us enough funding to get to the point where we can achieve universal service on our own steam. So a couple of years in, we have a progress update to give you, but that was the original intent. And again, just as a reminder of why this investment makes sense, fiber is it is the best technology to be able to deliver symmetrical broadband. So there's wireless technologies which are really useful for a lot of things, but in a place like Vermont where we have weather and terrain and mountains, where the business case can actually support fiber, this is a long-term investment. And so the state of Vermont has taken the money upfront and is investing now in the future. And there's a lot of parallels that are drawn between what we're doing now and what was done in the past with rural electrification. So, yeah, so I think that's about that. And then this slide, this is testimonials from some of the residents. And the reason we put this in here is really just to remind everyone, like, it's very easy to get focused on what we're building and how many miles we built and how many passing, like how many addresses now have access to fiber, and maps will show on the later pages. But it's important to step back and think about why we're doing this and for whom we're doing this. So we're doing this for the people for whom we're now able to open up things like working from home. Or one of my favorite stories in my district is I'm now on the board of a level 3 residential care facility, and they practically begged us when they heard that we were coming. They said, we really want to be a beta customer because we have calls for the state. We can't do them. We have files we need to upload. They fail. So it's really transformational for them. And I'm sure like that one story I happen to know, but here's some more. There's dozens of others for whom this has really been a big change. And what I can also speak to is the people where we haven't yet gotten there, they're still feeling pain. And it's cold comfort for them that a lot of other parts of the county have broadband when they're still suffering. So it's really rewarding to be working on something where you can feel the tangible benefit. And so it's important to just be reminded of these are the residents and these are the businesses for whom we're doing this. And also a good opportunity to give a shout out to all of the volunteers that have been participating for many years on the CUD governing boards. We have a couple that are sitting here in the audience today, and all the CUDs throughout the state, all 9 of them. All of them, the governance is from people who are appointed by towns to sit on the governing boards. Executive committees meet more frequently. There have been thousands and thousands of hours. And so the dedication of those residents and those citizens, I think, is also important to call out.
To realize how far we've come in less than 10 years.
Well,
In there somewhere. 5 years. When we first started doing this, I can remember, having testimony about, well, we found a place in the town hall where we can have a desk. And it started at that very basic level. We have to find a place to have a desk, and then we have to find someone that'll give us a computer. And it's come so far, and the interaction and cooperation, we're sure how well that would do either. And it's
I think
gone
it's,
without a hitch.
yeah, and that's kind of what this slide is gonna get to. So this is our 2021 map. And the blue is fiber that existed in 2021, and the green is cable that existed in 2021. But you see there's a lot of gray roads that didn't have cable or fiber. And there's a lot of places that didn't have fiber and just really had cable. And so there's that's where we were in 2021. And then over the last 5 years, the Vermont Community Broadband Fund has funded over 2,500 miles of
And that really dense blue line area is basically EC fiber.
EC fiber. That's what the
model.
say, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that EC fiber there, and then a VTEL portion below that was funded through VTOP and the BIP. And so
Lots of,
I don't even remember what those things are anymore. That was like a decade ago. And so when we changed to 2026, you can just see the palpable difference in the amount of fiber throughout the state. So just
there we go.
2021, 2026.
Yeah.
it's
And a spine right down the middle.
And
yeah.
that's the. And so the pink is what the CUDs have planned. So in the upper right hand corner, which is blocked by that box, but we have our USDA Reconnect, which we'll finish building out this year, and the rest of our ARPA grants up in the Northeast. And then Northwest has a couple of sections that they're finishing, and then DB Fiber has the rest of their ARPA project that they're finishing. So those pink things are stuff that the CUDs have in progress. And then the rest of the gray roads, a lot of which is in the Northeast Kingdom and Central Vermont. But there are little pieces of it through DB Fiber and, you know, all through the state. There are little pieces of stuff that's going to be covered by the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment. So we're still waiting to hear final approval from NTIA. Vermont's one of the final 4 in that, but that will take care of the gray roads that are in that map. And some of the green, because of BEAD, will turn to blue. So a lot of the stuff that just has cable now will have fiber at the end of a BEAD build out. So it's a huge amount of progress.
What's the green again?
The
Like
green-
I'm looking at the islands.
The green is cable.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It means that it means that it has 100 megabits per second down and 20 megabits per second up. And then if it's gray, it has less than that, usually less than 25.3.
So the green by definition is 100 down and 20 up
Correct.
as a minimum.
It's a minimum.
Blue is 5.
And the blue is all 100 symmetrical. And the pink will be. I mean, not just 100 symmetrical, almost all of these are gig and 2 gig systems, so it's 1,000 and 2,000 megabytes per second symmetrical.
I'm just curious, now that I know fiber is a big issue for data centers, and we've heard about a bill to ban them over 100 megawatt AI
Not been pause.
whatever you want to call it for the next 5 years. We don't have any, by the way, but are you seeing any more interest from data centers, you know, your typical data center, because of the fiber network that's being built out here?
We are having conversations with University of Vermont, Medical Center. There's a variety of folks that Ellie and I meet with as part of a consortium to work on what Vermont needs and what the future looks like and how we can work together with other states and the relationships that we've built with other education and research networks. So that's part of the conversation. So I wouldn't say that there's anything more than that from that perspective.
I think in general, data centers, there's a correlation between cost of electricity and where people want to put data centers. So in general, looking nationwide, it's not probably the most attractive siting date for data centers in general, but things like edge data centers and high performance centers, since colleges and universities, bit of a different story.
And
You know, just introduce yourself.
I will, I'll come over where the
To
camera can
those who
see me.
don't know you.
FX Flynn, Francis Xavier Flynn. I'm the chair of the governing board of the East Central Vermont Telecommunications District, EC Fiber. Even before we began to do this, Vermont did have a pretty good fiber backbone because SovereignNet started to build it and FirstLight took them over and kept building it out. So kind of the fiber infrastructure for doing data centers has been around for a while. The CUDs really are primarily residential plays. It's gonna take us a while to build up to the point where we could do something like hospitals and all. So in the meanwhile, we do have providers like FirstLight that have had that in Vermont for a while.
Who has data?
Just looking at the map, for example, we take northwestern Vermont, northern part of Franklin County and virtually all of Grand Isle green. And I assume that the commercial provider is really the one who is the internet provider for those areas. Do you have any thoughts of cable expansion into those areas?
I mean, fiber expansion.
Fiber, mainly fiber.
Well, I can give a general answer to that. So the funding that we received both under Act 71, 2021 from Vermont, and then also the new federal funding, it requires, it's meant to be serving the areas that aren't served. And so that's why if there's cable, then typically it wouldn't be built with the grant funding that CUDs have received. Having said that, every CUD, so the first thing is to make sure that people who don't have access to what the US Treasury defines as broadband get access to broadband. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, as CUDs, we are, again, part of the idea here of standing up these independent municipal entities is to give us the independence and the financial ability to make business decisions to be able to serve the consumers in those areas.
Mhm.
And so I think the general answer, I mean, I don't want to give a specific answer on behalf of that
Sure.
district, but the general answer is if the district believes there's a business case, it can choose to invest in it.
Mhm.
So that answers that question.
Well, I think the business case from my perspective is I have lousy service, although I have cable. By a commercial provider, and the provider appears to have absolutely no interest in improving the service. I'm paying for up to 800 MBS per second, and I rarely get 200.
Mhm.
And
Up to is a phrase that the
Yeah,
industry uses that is utterly meaningless,
And the prices are probably pretty high. if
and the
they're
prices are too high,
broadband
absolutely,
coverage, Which is
compared to
another,
what I see you're charging.
comment in general, is
Mm-hmm.
that like, it's great to make sure that everyone has access to broadband. And the next challenge is the affordability, and part of affordability is competition can keep prices in check.
Mhm.
That's how the market should be operating.
I do think that one of the things that we're gonna see from the broadband equity access and deployment funds that, we're all hoping to hear about soon. Is that there were addresses throughout the area. So even if there was only 5 or 6 addresses along a road and there was a bunch of served addresses along the road, those were still bid for. And many of them are going to be served with a fiber provider as a result of that. So I think that at the end of the BEAD era, you're gonna see virtually all of that green turn blue. In most cases, from Fidium, but in some cases from Comcast. So both Fidium and Comcast were also.
Yeah, see, Fidium is sort of spotty in terms of where it's located, at least at this point. Maybe there are lots of further expansion, but you're looking at them rather than at fiber for the areas like that.
So the Fidium is only building out fiber at this point in time. Yeah. And so it just depends on whether whether the CUD does the build out or whether the private provider does the build out. Really has to do with the motivation that the provider has and the funding availability and decision-making process of the CUD.
And that's another great point, that if you look at this map, we've said about 2,500 miles of new fiber have been funded by funding under Act 71. But if you look at all the blue on the map, that's more than 2,500 miles.
Mhm.
And so the CUDs, by having received funding and started their builds, have actually prompted private providers to build in areas with business cases were strong for us to be able to get there first and to prevent CUDs from, going in there and being second to market. So it's logical, but I think that the funding had the intended effect. And as a result of that, Vermont is getting closer to universal service faster than would have been the case otherwise.
So we just really want to, give a shout out because you are really who made this happen, through the formation of the CUDs, for the formation of the Vermont Community Broadband Board, the investment of the ARPA funds, the merger legislation, which brought together CV Fiber and NEK Broadband and has been beneficial for both of us. Together, our district has gone over 10,000 passings. We've built 1,200 miles. We've got 2,000 customers. We just made a really, big indent in that area. And then the match funding to enable the CUDs to compete and BEAD, that's the $30 million that enabled us to. We've used it for our USDA Reconnect grant to match that. We've used it for our US Community Connect grant. So these are bringing tens of millions of dollars in, but all of the CUDs were able to also use it to compete for BEAD to bring the BEAD money in. And so that has enabled, some large investments there. So we just, it's just a major thank you because you are the folks that made this happen.
When we started this, the money that the state used for broadband expansion was whatever was left over in the Universal Service Fund,
Right.
which was usually a couple $1,000s, and it allowed us to kind of offset the cost with a commercial provider to run it 10 more miles up the road. But we were basically had no money. And we have come a long way. Getting the initial, these are not, you have to have an initial capital investment. You gotta buy the cable and there's you know, before you actually get anybody hooked up and they're actually paying money in. We got to the end and we still haven't really dealt with affordability. There is a significant cost to these folks, significantly leveraged, so that they can't really offer really low prices that some families can afford. So we haven't made it possible for everyone to afford to sign up. And I doubt that we're gonna find that money this year either. But the feds have come and gone and
Well, that's a great opening. It's something we can talk to directly. So, so you mentioned the federal fund. So there was something called the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is a $30 a month subsidy for qualifying households. And so all of the CDs in this room today, so NEK CV, Maple Broadband, and EC Fiber, we all grandfathered in the customers who qualified for that, and we've been self-funding it since the funding went away. And was that May 24? Yeah, so almost 2 years now. And Krista has been continuing to add new customers. And so as of today, we actually had the press releases, Maple Broadband, our governing board voted to do the same thing, to take what we had and go through the process of being able to qualify new households and have that subsidy. And that is the Vermont Community Broadband Board has a grant program that they announced last year, and many of us have won, and they implement when the ground unfreezes, which is called the Affordable Long Drop Program, which covers the costs to connect the household to the road. Because there are some locations, either they're very far from the road or they require buried service. And that cost is not something which CUDs can take on. We need to get to the end of the road before we start, subsidizing putting conduits under people's driveways. But we need to make sure that we're actually able to address these barriers to connecting houses and to be able to pay the ongoing fees. And so I think to your point, the problem is not solved. And part of what we're doing is to better understand what is the impact and how much money is actually required to tackle this possibility. But I think the other kind of political commentary here is that federal government can't fund it. The state of Vermont has lots of other priorities, but even small ISPs, which are CUDs, we are investing in doing this because we can, which we'll just leave that right there. Okay.
Just how much of the CUD's business is business as opposed to individual households?
I think it probably depends on the area. I mean, so we actually sell the same product to businesses as to households. I mean, as FX said, it's a different thing to have an enterprise product that you sell to a large business. So there's a lot of small businesses. And I would say for us, it's probably maybe in the range of 10%.
Well, the reason I raise it is this is when we started this process, many years ago, and I was here then. One of the things we certainly talked about was the importance of getting broadband so we didn't wind up with two Vermonts. A Vermont that was in the world of connectivity and a world that wasn't. And as far as being able to get new businesses into an area, to be able to get businesses to be able to be sustained as they grow, this is an absolutely essential element and probably the most important element that we can think of right now in the notion of investment to ensure that it gets to where we want it to go. I think it's absolutely critical for the economic future of Vermont.
and that was one of the driving forces.
Yeah, so affordability is one of our themes going forward, better understanding what's the need, how do we pay for it, how do we do it, how do we optimize it, but then also how do we maximize the use of this public infrastructure? Exactly to your point. I mean, it's great that it's there. We need to understand and address all the barriers to getting people connected and keeping them connected. But then also we have this public infrastructure and we have lots of nonprofits in the state and economic development. And so what does that actually mean and how do we work together? And then the other plug that we wanted to put in is there's obviously a lot of work on addressing the housing situation in Vermont. And so when new houses go up, it is so much cheaper and more efficient to put in the infrastructure to serve them with broadband as they're being built rather than after the fact. And so one of the things that we'd like to suggest is coordination between, in particular, new housing developments, which is even more expensive than, if you miss a single family home, it's a lot less expensive than if you've missed a new property development that's going in. And so requiring there to be some coordination between new buildings that go up or new property developments and the local CUD, if there is one, or at the very least the local telephone companies, just to make sure that there's that awareness and that the passive infrastructure to connect with broadband is there, and that consumers have a choice as to which service provider they have.
Yeah, both the buildings and the infrastructure that gets to those buildings, oftentimes they'll put in underground. So much cheaper.
Oh, yeah. Yep, and I think we talked about a lot of this. So we have talked about the next round of federal funding, and we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but that still needs to be approved by the NTIA, then by NIST, and then we need to get the grants for all the provisional winners and roll that out. But that's a 4-year period, and so it'll happen, and it will take some time to get to the end of the road. But it's encouraging that we're almost there in terms of at least getting the funding, and then building becomes something that's obviously we've had some success in doing over the last couple of years. And so there, I think, yes, the challenges are, we've started to shift our own heads from how do we get to the end of the road to what does it mean to connect the houses, and then what do we do with it? So that's where we are.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you for all the work. Those of us that have been here for a while know how much work has gone into this.
It's gratifying to see that blue change.
It is. You know, and I think, yeah, we ever really think we should see it, but we did. So thank you.
Thank
and
you.
Stay in touch. But what you think, stay in touch.
Yeah, we
If
absolutely
you
will.
need something, you know where to find us.
Well, vice versa. So as Vacuda, we're also here that if you guys ever have a question about how might broadband help this, or what would be the impact on broadband, we are more than willing to be able to provide feedback as well, if you guys ever have questions.
And we collectively have the perspective throughout the state, right? Whether it's the 3 CUDs that use Fidium, or the CUDs that use Waitsfield Champlain, or Great Oaks, or then I mean, we have a lot of perspectives, so appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Captive insurance, these guys are as great as captive insurance.
This year it is, because you've done something right.
I want you to know that we are probably gonna have some kind of celebration at some point in the late spring, early summer, that our network is finished.
Yay.
And I think, it's gonna coincide with the 20th anniversary of one of the first organizing meetings at the grassroots crowd that made this all happen. Because it actually, for EC5, it really got started in 2006.
Yeah.
So.
You know, it was like, it was 9 years later, we realized, you know, we need to be a district, we need a government, so revenue.
So this is good.
Yeah, and in fact, if you do everything right, in 2027, we're gonna refinance about half of it. About $35 million worth. And get an investment grade rating. And drive our annual bond coverage down by $500,000. We should be able to start cutting our prices at that point. Because right now, about $40 to $50 a month of our rates just goes to pay our bonds. Yeah,
Yeah,
Capital costs.
yeah.
yep. So that is a big one starting out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you then.
All of
Be
you.
careful. Thanks for having us.
Okay.
Would you like me to admit, Joan, to the?
Yes, we are going on and we are already fine together. To the educational service agencies and Joan Wade, and Joan is on Zoom. There she is. Welcome, Joan, and this is Senate Finance, and just introduce yourself for the record, so we have a name to go with the voice, and then tell us a little bit about your organization and Anything you think you should know?
Okay. Thank you all very much for giving me some of your valuable time today. I am Joan Wade, the Executive Director of the Association of Educational Service Agency, or AESA. AESA is a national association that organizations that you're talking about belong to. It's a voluntary national professional organization. Prior to having this role 10 years ago, I served as the administrator of a CISA in Wisconsin for 15 years. And prior to that, I was a member of the Wisconsin State Legislature and various education roles before coming to the legislature. So that's a little bit about my background. I have written testimony that I put into your record. I'm not going to read that to you because I know you're short on time today, and I'm going to try to catch you up on that time. But I thought if it's okay with you, I really want to make this so you're getting your questions answered. AESA has just under 500 members, which are educational service agencies like CISAs and BOCES, as our members in 44 different states. So I thought that today I would talk to you about how those organizations are governed, what different kind of governance structures we see across the country, how they're funded, the variety of ways that those organizations are funded. I know you're interested in a little bit about startup costs, so I'll try to answer those questions as they come up. And then I want to talk to you about services that educational service agencies provide. I do have a PowerPoint, but I almost think that it's going to be more valuable of your time if I talk about a section, and then if you want to ask questions, I'm happy to answer your questions, because I really want to make this a good use of your time and try to answer as many questions I can. How does that sound for kind of an agenda for the next 30 minutes or so?
That sounds fine. I'm not seeing any objection here, so
Okay,
it's your
great.
presentation.
We don't know very much, so we're happy
Okay.
to learn what you've got.
Okay, well, I'm going to share with you what I can in the brief time that we have together. So educational service agencies is what we refer to the ESAs when we're talking about their work across the country. They go by about 20 different names: CISAs, RISAs, BOCES, and a variety of other names. But what they do is very similar in that they serve a region of public schools in each state, and they have a diverse portfolio of services. So they're not just serving special education needs or technology support, but they do whatever the local districts need them to do. And typically they'll work hand in glove with the State Department of Ed. So as the legislature or the State Department of Ed have initiatives that they want to roll out statewide, these organizations are in the region to help school districts implement those equitably across the state. So it's not a new concept. Educational service agencies have been around American public education for some as early as the early 1900s. Most of them came to fruition in 1950s and 1960s. And over time, they really became the organization that the State Department of Ed and state legislatures relied on to bring equitable services across the country. So there's about 4 different governance models that these organizations follow. And it really depends on the context of the state. But let me give you an example of what those are. So the governance models in some states are made up of the school administrators, superintendents in that region. So if there's 10 school districts in that region, there might be 10 school superintendents that serve on the governing board for the region, for the CISA. Local school board members are also a second avenue that some states use as the governing board. Those local school board members are either appointed or elected to represent their district at the regional level. And then there are some states that opt for mixed boards. They combine superintendents and school board members and get those appointed by statutes on a rotating basis to the regional board. And the fourth most common type of board are publicly elected boards that are voted on by citizens and serve within the region. Each model, I would tell you, has trade-offs. Superintendent-led boards are often emphasizing operational alignment with the school districts and being responsive to those district needs. So that's kind of a nice avenue. Even in states where the school superintendents do not make up the board, they have regular monthly meetings with their CISA to make sure that the CISA is meeting the needs that they have. And it's a really good professional learning opportunity for those school superintendents. That second board that I talked about with local school board members, oftentimes they really rely on bringing district priorities to their board meetings on a monthly basis. And they do represent the communities really well from across the state. Those publicly elected boards are really good about public accountability, but sometimes there's additional cost to those elections and gets to be a little complicated because sometimes those elections can be partisan rather than nonpartisan. And I always push people, especially when they're thinking about designing these new organizations, to think about making these as nonpartisan as possible. I always say that K-12 education really should be a nonpartisan thing. And I know in some states that's easier said than done. The second thing about governance distinction between the states is whether district participation in a certain ESA is voluntary or it's mandatory. And so in some states, in the statute, they will assign districts to be in a certain CISA, and they can't get services outside of that region. That's really a mandatory participation. You're telling the districts where they can get services from and what ESA they are connected to. Some states are totally voluntary in that the school districts can pick and choose which CISA they belong to, or they can buy services from some CISAs, but be a member of another CISA. So it's more of a voluntary model of how the school districts participate in that region. What's really consistent across all those models is that the CISAs are structured to support the K-12 school system, not to dictate, not to tell them what to do, but really to support their district operations. So let's switch to funding. How are they funded? So across the country, we really see three common models and one kind of unique model. So the common model is state-funded baseline. So the state will provide funding to the ESA either from GPR dollars, general purpose revenue, or through the State Department of Ed to do certain initiatives that the State Department wants them to do. That is more of a state funded, the state tells you what to do and they provide the money for you to do it with. The second funding model we see a lot of is entrepreneurial or fee for service. And that's when districts will go to the CISA and they'll purchase the services that they need. And the CISA has a way to develop those services, find those services by partnering with other organizations and so on. It used to be years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it was very common for states to fund their ESAs. That's very much not the case anymore. We see a lot of hybrid models. So that's your third type. So state funded, fee for service, or hybrid. And the hybrid is typically what we see the most of across the country. That's when there's some state funding provided by the State Department of Ed or the state legislature to roll out statewide initiatives that they want to see done equitably across all the school districts in the state. And they also have some fee-based services. So the school districts might get together, much like what's happening with your BOCES, and say, hey, we can't find enough speech and language pathologists in our special ed department for our school. Can you, BOCES or CISA, hire someone and then have them work part-time in different districts and run that contract through us cooperatively? So that is an example of a fee for service. The districts have a need, the CISA can help with that need, and then they cooperate on how they purchase those services. The last funding model that we see across the country is when an ESA has taxing authority. So there's only one state that I'm aware of in the country that gives ESAs that authority to levy a local property tax, and that's in the state of Michigan. And Michigan has 59 different ESAs, educational service agencies, but they also have their own taxing authority, and they get state funds to do statewide projects equitably across the state. But again, I would tell you that for the most part, our members do a lot of fee for service and a lot of some, not a lot anymore, but some money coming from the state to support their work. All right, I've talked to you about governance and I've talked to you about funding. What about those startup costs? What do we have to think about when you're starting up new organizations? Once you've made the decision on, are these going to be CISAs where they have set boundaries and school districts belong to a certain CISA, or can they be shared services where they have a member in one CISA, but they could purchase services outside that CISA, and you decide how you're going to fund them. Is the state going to help them with funding, especially startup funds? And I wish there was a black and white answer for you, but of course I can't make it that easy. So I'm going to tell you it depends. It really depends on what your expectations are for those organizations. So ESAs or CISAs are often misunderstood, I would say, as creating new administrative layers or bureaucracies for schools. But in practice, they are typically funded by reallocating existing expenditures and consolidating duplicated functions, such as a special ed administrator that can be shared between districts, or deaf and hard of hearing teacher that can be shared between districts. That is much more efficient and effective than trying to have one per district. The startup costs for these organizations really are going to depend on what it is you want them to do. They tend to be modest because an ESA, when they're starting, can coexist in an existing facility. So you don't need to build a new building, although I'm sure they would like it if you did, but they can coexist within a K-12 school district and share some office space. Or sometimes we've seen it where they've coexisted in higher education institution where they have room to house these organizations until they really get their services going and their staffing going. And then oftentimes they will expand into a larger space. But coexisting in shared office space is a lot of times what happens to get them off the ground at a cost-effective way. There's also a lot of times when districts are collaborating together through a CISA that they will, you won't have to go out and look for new staff, but you can repurpose staff that's now assigned to a district that now can work across district boundaries with other districts. So to me, over the long term, states consistently have found that ESAs really reduce costs through cooperative purchasing, through shared staffing for specialized positions, through reduced administrative duplication, and for improved grant acquisitions. So a lot of times our members will have grant writers and go out to find grants for schools that want to do something That's maybe not typical, but important for the students in their area. So the scope of the services that our members provide really vary. Almost everybody does special ed services that is a member of AESA. That's really quite common. They include low incidence and high cost supports for students that are, there's not many of these students in a district, but it allows districts to meet those legal and instructional obligations without duplicating expensive positions. So I think I've already mentioned it, but when you think about speech and language pathologist or teachers for the deaf and hard of hearing or visually impaired students, they're really hard to find, and there's not in each district, there's usually not enough students that needs a full-time teacher, but can be shared through the special ed services. A lot of ESAs also run the special ed programs and the Medicaid reimbursement programs for the districts that are in their region. Professional development, instructional coaching is another support mechanism that our members will often do to help with the implementation of state standards and state initiatives. They do a lot of work around technology infrastructure, helping with cybersecurity, helping with data systems to reduce risk and improve system reliability, especially in rural schools. There are some of our members that will do what I call back office services. So they'll be the HR for districts. They'll do payroll, financial services, freeing those district leaders up to focus on student learning and not the business office functions that can be done, especially for small schools and rural schools, collaboratively. There's many of our districts that often have cooperative purchasing contracts, and there are some national cooperative purchasing organizations that help lower the cost of buying supplies for schools, buying new roofs, athletic things, and our members help districts with those cooperative purchasing ventures. It also helps a lot with compliance and reporting and accountability reporting, both to the state level and to the federal level. And a lot of the times the CSAs are the one to help with that, student information systems and getting that data reported accurately. Our members often have crisis response teams that will go into districts when there's some kind of a crisis that they need to manage during an emergency. They also now do a lot of coordinating of mental health services for students and for staff, especially, again, I keep saying this, but in rural parts of states where there aren't a lot of mental health supports, our members are able to bring that to the schools and make that a reliable service for kids. CTE, career pathways, is another area where CSAs often find themselves helping K-12 school districts. So I want to give you just a couple of examples of services in selected states. So it maybe will help you understand better the level of support that school districts can get from these types of organizations. One example is in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, the CSAs, which are cooperative educational service agencies, provide a lot of special education shared staff. They provide instructional support and business services to districts statewide. Some of the CSAs supply library media specialists to be shared between school districts. Again, hard to find people to fill those positions. So when you can cooperate, that's a lot better. Through their cooperative purchasing program, CSAs have been able to help school districts save substantial amount of money on their operations. And some reports are up to $50 million have been saved in Wisconsin in a year on some of their health insurance pools, some of their cooperative purchasing programs, and so on. In Iowa, they find they're called AEAs, Area Education Agencies, and they are Really strong delivering regional special ed leadership, instructional media services. So they have online streaming services for schools so that each school doesn't have to buy their own. They buy them regionally. And they have professional development that the AEAs coordinate. They do also have a large-scale cooperative purchasing program, and districts report that they save 20 to 25% a year on commonly purchased instructional and operational items through the cooperative purchasing program in Iowa. In Pennsylvania, they're called intermediate units, and they operate regional special ed programs. They operate professional development for teachers and educational leaders. They do compliance services. They help districts apply for E-rate funding for their technology programs. And particularly with smaller ones, smaller school districts, they really help with the federal and state requirements without duplicating those, again, specialized staff to do that work. In Texas, there's 20 ESCs. This is the last example I'll give you. And again, statewide professional development that makes it consistency across the 1,400 districts in Texas through those ESCs. They do technology integration, they do data system support, they implement assistance for statewide initiatives, and they really are supportive of both urban and rural districts. So when I talk about these organizations, while I keep saying how valuable they are to rural and small school districts, that I would say is definitely their sweet spot. They are a lifeline to small and rural districts, but there are also a lot of ESAs that are located in urban and suburban areas. So Houston, Dallas, Los Angeles, San Diego, Milwaukee, all have ESAs that are located in the urban area and works with the school system in that urban and suburban area. So while I think the sweet spot is the small rural schools, it's definitely not the only one. One of the most significant benefits of ESAs is their impact on sustainability. ESAs across the country do not have the authority to close schools or to make decisions about district consolidation. However, I think they often play a critical role in helping schools remain viable by reducing that district administrative burden through shared leadership and business services. They often share specialized staff across districts. They support compliance. They lower the operating costs through those purchasing programs. And there have been national studies and state examples that consistently show that ESAs improve efficiency while expanding access to services for all kids. In multiple states, there have been documented state savings from cooperative purchasing program that I've mentioned, and I'm happy to put you in contact with those states and those state leaders so you can get some of that data directly from them. But just as importantly, while our members do not run schools, they often will have, they don't run public schools, but they, in some states, they do run alternative placement programs for students that are not being successful in the local school district. The cooperative, the Educational Service Agency, will bring together a school that several participate in sending kids to that school where they can find success because they have a lot of support. Some states also allow the ESAs to run magnet schools. In the state of Connecticut, in Mystic, Connecticut, they run a magnet school around a naval base where they have a lot of I can't remember the name of it right off the top of my head, and I had it, but I can't remember it right now. But it is chartered really to be a school for kids to come to and learn all about fishing and the fishing industry. There are some states that allow the ESAs to be charter school authorizers. Most states don't allow that, and most states don't allow them to run schools other than alternative schools. That's pretty common for our members. So I think I'm just going to wrap up here by saying that the governance structures that you develop, I think, really need to really need to reflect Vermont's size, your geography, your traditional governance models. What makes sense for you might not make sense for another state. Funding models should balance equity for students across the state with local flexibility. So you want to have it set up so the state can run statewide initiatives through these organizations and get it equitably distributed to all kids across your state, but yet have enough local flexibility. So when schools are working with their CISA and they need a service that the state hasn't necessarily thought of, like sharing a teacher or sharing a library media specialist, they can cooperate through this organization to contract for that service together. I think that phasing in an implementation is really wise. So I think it's really wise that you started out with a voluntary BOCES, and I'm assuming that you're watching that. We're watching that. We're supporting that BOCES as much as we can so that they can find success with their school districts. That's a great place to pilot. How is this going to go? How are the schools going to work together? What do they need that they don't have? As you continue to start implementing or think about implementing, how do we do this more formally on a statewide basis? I think that the ESAs are really an important part of the educational landscape. And in the majority of states, they really do improve efficiency, equity, and capacity for the public school systems. And while there are no two states that implement ESAs in exact the same way, I wish I had a model that I could say, do this, but it really has to meet your local context. The national experiment, though, with ESAs really demonstrates that these agencies help states stretch your limited resources, especially your limited dollars, to support those rural communities, and you strengthen the local school districts. So I took more time than I wanted to, but I am happy to answer questions as you may have them.
Okay. Ruth, I'm watching the clock because we have Michael Brady coming in next.
Michael's right
Please
there.
here.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Joan, thank you so much for this presentation. This is really helpful. And I just also want to know, I worked in Wisconsin for the Legislative Fiscal Bureau and Bob Lang in the late 1990s.
Oh, you are so lucky.
Yes, you were in the legislature, and Bob is one of my mentors, an amazing, amazing human being. And I worked very closely with your husband, Luther.
You did.
Yes, so please, please, please tell him I said hello. I still have thank you notes that he wrote me for the work that we did together.
Oh my gosh, that is for
When
those
I
of
saw
you.
I was like, oh my gosh.
Yes,
Very exciting.
I was there in and out pretty quickly, 3.5 years. I want to get back in education, but my husband was in the legislature for 26 years. And of those 26 years, many, many years on the committee of Joint Finance Committee,
Yes.
in House and Senate. So, that's fabulous.
He was a warrior for public education, rural public education, and it was just such a pleasure to work with him. So please tell him hello.
Could I just refer you to one thing that I failed to mention, but in the documents that I sent is a state-by-state report that we put together a few years ago. And in here, you will find every state listed, if they have ESAs, what they're called, how they're governed, and how they're structured. I think that might be really helpful in your deliberations.
And does that have information? Because what I'm interested in is information on how CISAs, or whatever you call them. I call them CISAs because that's what I learned in Wisconsin. Was what are they, how they are able to save money. You gave some great examples, but is there more detail in that report?
No, it does talk about how each state funds their ESAs, but it doesn't, and what they're called and how they're statute, but it doesn't really say how much money they save. And that's really a state by state thing. And I'm happy to do some of that research for you and with you if you want to reach back out with any one of you that are on this committee. There's really valuable information out there from our members that I could send your way if you want to see what those efficiencies are.
That would be great. I can connect with you separately and try to get that information. So I believe our committee assistant must have your contact information.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Joan. Great to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you too. Thanks for having me, everyone, and apologies for the time. It just went so fast.
Thank you. This has been helpful.
Good.
Apologize, we are on a tight schedule. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a good day, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye. Senator Watson, right up there.
Sure thing.
Perfect timing.
Okay. Hello, good afternoon.
You are here on 218.
Yes, 218, the salt bill. So at least two of your members are already familiar with this. So they're in Senate Natural Resources and Energy. So this was a bill that started its journey last year and started it early because we knew it would have a long path and ended up with perhaps a very curious path, but it had relevance to both the transportation committees as well as judiciary. The premise of the bill, is it useful if I talk about what the bill does? Okay, so
I'm just gonna walk us through it. So-
yes, fair enough. So as we're all very familiar, we need to be salting our roads in order to reduce the risk of slip and fall type accidents, to keep our roads safe, that sort of thing. And as the premise goes, if a little bit is sufficient, then a lot is better. And that means that there is pressure on salt applicators to oversalt potentially the services that they're responsible for, ideally in order to prevent slip and fall accidents from happening. Now the question comes up: what is a sufficient amount of salt that would be adequate for a surface? And as I understand it, there's not necessarily great training out there that exists to understand what that is, but the state has their own standards for salt spreading in their own fleets and for their projects. And so what this well, actually, before I get to that, it's also worth mentioning that as we continually spread salt on roads and parking lots, sidewalks, that salt inevitably gets into the soil, gets into our waterways, and we're starting to see some pretty serious negative impacts to particularly some waterways around the state of Vermont. Are you familiar with the idea of TMDLs, total maximum daily loads, particularly for phosphorus? So there is an equivalent kind of program, a TMDL, not for phosphorus, but for chloride contamination. And if you were to have too much chloride, if you reach a certain threshold, if you're beyond that, then you need to enter into you need to have a total maximum daily load for chloride. And that is potentially very costly, but it really is to preserve the integrity of the cleanliness of our waters, the integrity of our waters, to protect the aquatic biota that's there. But in addition, in some places where we're seeing a lot of salt, it is starting to get into people's drinking water, even, which is also particularly scary. So this bill proposes a system that is not new, actually. It is modeled after a system that New Hampshire does. It's called the Green Snow Pro program that offers training to private salt applicators. And it's voluntary, that's key. Lots of highlights there, voluntary. And if they participate in that program and are able to learn about the best management practices, and then after that program, if they keep sufficient records of their application, that they would enjoy some liability protection in terms of if slip and fall accidents happen on the surfaces that they were responsible for. And there was this discussion in judiciary about what that ought to look like. We ended up with something called an affirmative defense, which I will defer to Senator Matos to explain as an approach to judiciary. Fair enough. Or arguably, our legislative counsel could probably explain that better as well.
Yeah.
But it's better than myself on this. The idea here is that helps to reduce the pressure on salt applicators to oversalt surfaces. And let's try to salt to a sufficient level. And there just I mentioned the total maximum daily load difficulty. There are some places in Vermont that already have TMDLs for salt. They are mostly in Chittenden County, but we had data in natural resources that the rates of chloride contamination in waterways is increasing basically on every body of water in the state of Vermont, unfortunately, at this point. So the hope here is to have an ounce of prevention. So that's the idea. The reason I believe it is here is because section 5 includes a fee report. The model in New Hampshire is it is either entirely, oh no, I think it is. It's fund, that program is funded through the fees that they collect through their training program. And so the vision for this is that this program would either entirely or at least largely be paid for similarly by the fees from the program. And that is why it was here. Any questions I can answer for you at this point?
Can I make a quick comment? Senator Brock and I both serve on the Citizens Advisory Council for this Lake Champlain's future, and salt comes up a lot. And Karina Daly shared a one-pager on fluoride and salt with us not too long ago, and it's part of our strategic plan for the coming year. And it's so I'm really thrilled because it's legislation.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Super. Thank you.
Michael, you want to walk us through this? You can do the 2,000 foot. It's really gonna zero in on fees.
Okay.
We do.
This is Michael Grady with Dutch Council. You want it on the screen or do you want it?
On the screen's probably good because if anybody's watching or people in the audience can see it.
Oh, there we go. Wait ahead. So, I think this is Michael Grady with Dutch Council. I think Senator Watson did a pretty good job of providing context. In the spirit of doing a 10,000 foot overview and then zeroing in on the fee, I will move pretty quickly through the bill.
The bill we have says as introduced, it hasn't been.
Well, one of the things I was gonna summarize it is this kind of unusual history of this bill. It was introduced as S-29. It went to House Judiciary. There was debate on it there. At the same time in the House was looking at a version of it. S-29 went over there, came back. When it came back, it was put on H-319, a miscellaneous environmental subjects bill from out of Senate Natural, and a 319 came out of Senate Natural. One of your colleagues tried to put a wetlands amendment on it, went to the floor, came off the floor, went back to committee, got divvied up and sent to different bills. And this component did not go forward as part of the 319 or as part of the reallocation of the components of 319.
So this is a new bill.
New bill, same substance as what was going to come out of Senate Natural Resources as part of S29/H319 last year. So no need for a lot of amendment because they had worked through most of those issues.
It sounded like it had been through several committees, and it's rare to get something this new and different that hasn't been amended somewhere by the time it gets here. That explains that the amendments happened before it became
On two different bills.
in two different bills. Okay. So this one should be really just help.
So as Senator Watson said, the purpose of the bill is to provide for state conditions for application of fluoride and chloride alternatives so that there's safe travel for cars and pedestrians, while also improving the water quality of the state. As Senator Watson said, the state is required to go out every 3 years and identify waters or segments of waters that are impaired due to a pollutant. And fluoride is a pollutant that impairs water. So it prevents things like aquatic biota, aquatic habitat, and at times recreation. So what do you do when there's an impairment? You come up with a plan. Well, what is the plan for salt? Stop putting salt into the water. And how do you do that? And this is the first step. It's the voluntary approach. Do it voluntarily so you don't have to have mandatory provisions such as you need certain type of equipment if you're going to be operating in Colchester. You need to provide reports if you're operating in an impaired watershed. So to avoid those types of mandates, this is a voluntary program to hopefully address the issue without going to the mandates of a full TMDL.
So just real quick, I was thinking about salt alternative, and it just hit me. What about salt sand mix?
So that is still considered salt for the purposes of this program because it has the salt is pretty much every variation of chloride you can think of, and salt alternatives every variation that's not chloride that's used for de-icing and or dust suppression.
So that would fall under here.
Yes.
Would it be able to be used in different rates? Because usually this stuff I get's like 10% salt.
That's a great question. It's going to be part of the BMPs, like what rates and what alternatives can you use when you can use different alternatives to achieve the same safety while improving or not posing the same risk to water quality. So we get this creation of this new program at ANR. It's Chloride Contamination Reduction Program. Applying salt is what you think it is. Commercial salt applicator is a person who for compensation applies salt or salt alternatives. It's not municipal or state employees. As Senator Watson noted, AOT already has their own practices. And we'll talk about municipalities later in the bill. Master commercial salt applicator is someone who can train individuals within their organization. Salt, every variation of fluoride used for de-icing or dust control, salt alternative, everything that's not fluoride used for de-icing or anti-icing or dust control. Transportation infrastructure construction projects, you probably know what this is better than I. Some of you are in transportation, but it's a project that involves construction of roadways, parking lots, or sidewalks, or other construction activities that transportation facilities are within transportation right. Why is this in here? Because this is going to be exempt from the BMPs, because when you're doing these projects, you need to do certain applications, certain types of management that will be outside the BMPs because you have schedules, you have timelines, you have equipment moving in, etc. And so you need to have an allowance for that type of activity. So you get to the program. ANR, after consultation with AOT and other states, it's more than just New Hampshire that's doing this, shall establish the program for voluntary education, training, and certification of commercial salt applicators regarding effective application to provide for pedestrian and motor vehicle safety while also reducing the water quality. And as part of the program, they adopt by rule best management practices. Right, so best management practices are rules. So if you voluntarily become part of the program, those rules become part of your certification, but it's still a voluntary program. Those practices will address measures or techniques to increase efficiency in application of salt or salt alternatives, so that the least amount of salt or salt alternatives is used while maintaining safe conditions. Establish standards for when and how salt and salt alternatives are applied in order to prevent them from entering the waters of the state, including the alternatives that are cost effective and less harmful while maintaining safe conditions, whether and how to implement the equipment, calibrate the equipment, etc., and when sanding is appropriate alternative to salt or salt alternatives for de-icing or dust control. There's going to be record keeping requirements. It's going to be an important part of the certification. A model for record keeping requirements for certification, a testing requirement, and other requirements that the secretary deems necessary for the program. The program offers the training, again, voluntary. They offer the training to commercial applicators. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. Upon completion of training, the applicator shall be designated as certified commercial salt applicator. The term of the certification is 2 years. The business that employs that master can have that master train the persons in their organization. They have to submit an annual summary of total winter salt usage. It's just salt usage. It's not salt and salt alternatives here, because salt is the issue. Chloride is the issue. The secretary may revoke certification for violating the BMPs or the other requirements of the chapter. And then the program specifically excludes salt applications related to transportation infrastructure construction projects. It also does not apply to state agency staff. So that is AOT has their own construction transportation infrastructure projects, still get to use the salt and salt alternatives that they need in order for construction. Then you come to the legal benefit that the certified salt applicator will receive when they can complete certification. So when they complete certification, they shall have an affirmative defense, not just them, but the owner, occupant, or lessee of the real property that they maintain against a claim for damages resulting from a hazard caused by snow or ice. The claim damages were caused solely by snow or ice, and any failure or delay removing or mitigating the hazard as a result of implementing the BMPs. So what is an affirmative defense? When this bill started out in its original S29 iteration last year, it said that the applicator shall not be liable, period. Wasn't a defense, it was they shall not be liable. And that's a concern to certain persons who represent injured parties, because that's a stoppage on your access to the courts. Where an affirmative defense, it shifts the burden to the person who's being sued to show, hey, I deserve not to be liable. It's not that I'm just not liable, I deserve not to be liable. So the plaintiff can still bring the claim, but this commercial applicator or their maintained property owner gets to say, hey, we did what we were supposed to do. And because we proved that, we are not liable. That's what an affirmative defense is. And it was, I'm not going to characterize the trial attorney bar, but I don't think they will oppose. But that affirmative offense does not apply if the civil damages are due to gross negligence or reckless disregard of the hazard. So if you are just totally disregarding your duty, or you're totally recklessly disregarding the hazard, then you don't get the affirmative defense. So that gives that plaintiff the opportunity to say, hey, yes, you were doing the BMPs, but you were implementing them in a grossly negligent way. So still access to the court, still remedy for the plaintiff. In order to assert this affirmative defense, the certified applicator needs to keep records. When they applied, where they applied, rates that they applied. Now, some applicators will have the equipment already in their trucks. Senator Watson referenced New Hampshire. They had a test case there. The company there had all the GPS and all the measuring and monitoring equipment. They easily refuted the plaintiff's claim, and they showed that the plaintiff wasn't even hurt by the parking lot, but by the sidewalk grass. But you don't need that equipment. Remember, A&R is going to create a document, a model for how you do your recording so that you will be able to take advantage of this program without having to invest significantly in that equipment. And still, if you don't want to do it, you don't need to. So there's also an enforcement provision, water quality issues, applying anything around and it going into water raises water quality issues. If you're certified and you're complying with the BMPs, you're presumed not to be causing a water quality issue. So that's another benefit, legal benefit that the certified applicator receives. Then there's education and outreach by the program. They will inform commercial applicators of the existence of the program and the affirmative defense. They inform the public of how salt and salt alternatives should be used and how that they can have a harm to not just water quality, but pets and wildlife. Then come to a section which there has been some little misperception of. There was at one point in the evolution of this bill a requirement that municipal salt and sand storage facilities cover the facilities by a certain date. There is no longer that requirement. This is not a requirement. This is a report from A&R to you, the General Assembly, regarding management of state and municipal facilities for storage. And they report what facilities are out there. An estimate of the number of facilities that are currently covered, an estimate of the number that are not covered and within 100 yards of a water or drinking water source, an estimate of the number of facilities that are not covered and are more than 100 yards from it, and then an estimate of the total cost to cover or move those facilities, including a proposed annual amount of funding that would be required to meet the timelines for covering or movement. Now, EPA tried to do the cover requirement years ago, like maybe almost 15, 20 years ago now. There was like a national revolt among municipalities because there was no money involved. Money is the key part of how you cover these facilities, and you can talk to Senator Westman about that. He'll tell you.
It's starting to feel like manure pits.
It's not like manure pits because the farmer has that requirement, right?
But this, I mean, it's move it, who pays to move it, cover it, don't cover it.
Didn't we talk about covering salt last year?
It's part of this,
Yeah.
like this bill came, or this variant of this bill came through this committee.
That's why it's, okay.
Right. Now, section 4, remember the commercial applicators, it doesn't apply to state or municipal, but there's another section that gives municipal applicators the same affirmative defense if they go through the annual yearly Vermont local roads training, and it has that component about application of the best management practices. So municipal salt applicators, they will get that it's not the type of liability protection that they are looking for. You've probably heard from the league about what they are looking for, but it's the same affirmative defense that the commercial applicator would get for completion of the training program.
Remember state snowplow driver I was on judiciary so many years ago. And there was sovereign immunity,
Well,
just, I thought local. If I'm the town and I'm putting down salt. And I slide into the car in front of me, doesn't, somebody is sovereign, right?
so I made this mistake last year in saying that the municipalities really had sovereign immunity and should not be worried about the liability. And they very clearly told me that I didn't know what I was talking about. It's like the municipality has sovereign immunity, but the employee can be sued. And the municipality has to represent that employee when they are engaged, when the liabilities from their scope of their duty, their employment duty. So it effectively places the municipality into an area where they don't have sovereign immunity.
Right,
Like,
they are getting sued, their employees get.
Right, but then they have to represent that
Yeah,
and think on that potential liability. And so I was schooled last year because I thought the same as you, Chair.
Yeah.
But I was clearly redirected.
thank you.
So then we come to the section, why you are here, why I am here. The secretary solicits interest from third-party vendors for training and certifying the commercial applicator. There is an option for A&R to do this through their own staff or do it through contractors. New Hampshire started with the contractor, then moved to its own staff, paid for it with a fee. In Wisconsin, they kind of do it depending on where you are, more rural agency staff won't necessarily get there. There's a lot of remote that's done. So they solicit interest from those third-party vendors for training and certifying the salt applicators, and then they recommend to you, the General Assembly, including this committee specifically, a fee to be charged either by the state or by a third-party vendor for the certification of the commercial salt applicators. Any fee that's going to be charged has to be approved by the General Assembly. So
It
there was
doesn't even set a fee, it just
right.
says that if there is a fee, we will.
They're gonna recommend the fee, and then if you wanna apply the fee, you have to approve the fee. And that's in there specifically because when it went to Ways and Means the first time, you gave A&R the ability to allow the contractor to charge a fee. And Ways and Means said, wait a minute, we're the ones that approve fees. And so it has to come through the General Assembly.
Alright.
And then the last, contingent implementation funding, any new program that you're seeing where the appropriation's not already in the budget or in some line item has this clause, A&R will not be required to implement any of the requirements of this if it does not receive sufficient funding. Yeah, it takes effect on passage. James has a fiscal note up. Well, I don't actually see it on the. He has a fiscal note.
Okay.
I
think I did just post that.
Pardon?
I think I did just post that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's in there. Refresh. Okay.
Yeah, there it is. And because of it's going back to the previous iterations of the bill, it started out with $150,000 appropriation. That was stripped, and it was $125,000 appropriation. That was stripped. Then it was a $250,000 appropriation for the contractor and $150,000 for a staff person at A&R. That was all stripped. So you see James is talking or addressing what those estimates are. $350,000 would be necessary for program implementation. a one-time $200,000 per contracted service, $150 per one permanent classified position. And that's if it would be funded, if implemented. And so that's,
But does the bill call for it to be funded through fees?
well, the report, remember, is we solicit from third-party vendors, they
Yeah.
find out what the cost would be, they find out what fee would be,
Oh,
and then they recommend that fee to you. So you're gonna, I can't
it's the money for
necessarily,
the report to tell us how
Right.
much the fee
Right.
should be.
right, and whether or not that fee can be approved for it.
Okay. Okay. This is different. Usually it comes to us with a fee.
I'm
Or an
not the one to
underlying
refer
fee
the
in the
bill
bill.
here, I would refer them to the government. And so that would be fine with me, but.
Okay. Committee, any questions? We've got some more testimony. I don't know that it needs to be, it's a side by, walk through. But we will take some more testimony, and if anybody knows anybody that poses, let us know. And then this might be what we can move. Since
Yeah, I mean, I think we actually had this bill last year here already.
Yeah, it
The
was.
Senate Natural Resources Committee has done it twice.
Yeah,
It's already been passed in both bodies.
you missed the, yeah.
Yeah.
The long tail of its trips.
Now I've been there for the whole town. I did not miss it.
It doesn't say anything.
Yes,
Purport to, and can that be quantified?
what it does is prevent,
No, I heard that what it does.
yeah,
but
if we get to the point where our rivers have to be under a TMDL, that would be way more expensive than doing a
I'm
voluntary.
just wondering
program.
if when the JFO look at it, that they look at what it costs, but to anybody look at what does it essentially save, or is that quantifiable?
I mean, I can't speak for JFO, but they don't usually do that kind of analysis or put it in their fiscal note about like future savings.
Somebody ought to.
We should ask our citizens advisory groups, what they've,
Yeah,
I
they
bet
may
they've
have
done
some.
some modeling, yeah.
Committee, we are in position to have a 10-minute break.
Wow, I'm used to that.
So have you got any questions?
Thanks, Mike.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we would. Our next witness is